Washington, and Jackson Parks in Chicago. And that is where Brunell Donald-Kyei is. She thinks this is going way too far. Brunell, it's good to see you. You know, look, I'm sympathetic to both sides on this, but I think that at this point it's getting a little out of hand because some people are now feeling that, you don't want a statue of George Washington because George Washington was a slave owner. But George Washington stands for so much of what this country is as the first president of the United States. Are people taking this too far in your view?
First, God bless you and God bless America. Yes, I believe they are taking it too far. You know, this is history, and it's important that we know our history. A lot of our youth don't even know history as is. And so at least with these monuments and statues around, at least if a kid says, hey, who is that? You would be able to say, hey, that's Robert E. Lee or that's George Washington. And as far as Chicago, the parks and the things that they want to change, you're worried about monuments and statutes when you have living, breathing children in our inner cities dying, going to prison, standing on a corner, selling drugs because they don't have jobs.
Clearly.
I mean, come on.
I've always said this. I mean, in other words, economic success, economic prosperity is freedom for all, and that is absolutely what we need to get focused on. A lot of these things are side issues. That said, I mean, there's a couple different things going on here, right? I mean, in one case, they're talking about George Washington. In the other case, they're talking about the man who led the Confederate Army. Let me just ask you, you're a black woman. If you see a statue like that, do you feel that it should come with an explainer with a little bit of history about how this was a very dark time in American history? I mean, you say it teaches something, but, a lot of people are concerned that it may have an intimidation aspect to it as well. As a black woman, how do you feel?
I feel like this. I'm a curious person. I like to research if I don't know something, and I don't think that we need to dumb things down with inscriptions for our children. We want them to be curious. We want them to be thinkers as well. And I'll tell you this, Miss Trish, today it's statutes. The next thing we're going to hear, the Constitution needs to be torn and destroyed and rewritten because there were slave owners who were on the Constitution.
Well, that's
and
where
then
it's
the
just
next
going
thing you're going to hear, also, let me tell you, the next thing you're going to hear is, oh, because your family members were slave owners, all of the descendants of slave owners need to be deported. I'm telling you, if we as the American people do not stand up to this madness and say, look, enough is enough, it's going to get out of hand. It's going to go somewhere that is going to become uncontrollable.
Well, Brunell, we've already heard talk of reparations. I mean, that came up on the campaign trail, and Hillary Clinton didn't shut that one down. In other words, it was a dark time in American history. We have moved on, and we have moved on from the 50s and 60s and the strife of the civil rights era. What concerns me right now, when I see Nancy Pelosi saying that there's one less white supremacist in the White House, but there's still plenty of them there, or the DNC, which came out with a very similar statement, labeling everyone in the administration as a white supremacist, basically saying, Brunell, if you are a conservative, if you are a Republican, then somehow you are a racist. That is one big, horrendous, awful accusation. And aren't they bringing us right back to the identity politics that we have overcome?
And that's why they lost. And that's why our president, Donald J. Trump, is in office. The people are sick of this political correctness. The people are tired who are working every day of being called racists, and they're tired of their voices being suppressed. And I'll say, we as Americans have to put a stop to this. We have got to dig deep, remember the love and the freedom that we are fighting for and standing for. People like Nancy Pelosi and the DNC, they can't talk about any racism. Look at all the token blacks in the Democratic Party. Many of the youth in our inner cities are under these Democratic regimes, suffering and dying. So I don't want to hear anything about any racism until the Democratic Party addresses its racism in its party.
You know, the Democratic Party hasn't really done much at all for black Americans, and they certainly have not helped them economically or with education. And the last thing I'd just say is, historically, they have been anything but helpful to black Americans. Anyway, Brunell, it's good to see you. Thank you very much for joining me this morning.
Good to see you, too. God bless you. God bless America. And God bless our President, Donald J. Trump.